joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Jodia.
So, Chana, you are a marketing maven. You are an author of an ABC of equality. You are the guru behind GeenieBox. I mean, what other things are you doing or not doing at this time? I'm so impressed by your body of work. So thank you so much for joining us today during this time with Conversations with NESVANMAR. So Chana, can you tell us a little bit about, just what brought you here today, GeenieBox, being an author, everything. How did you get to this point, and what has that success been like?
Thank you again for having me. This is like super fun. It's actually my first, I guess, webinar since COVID-19. I've been really intentional about just taking care of myself. Um, and then in this month, I've decided to kind of like get back out into the wide world, and what that looks like now is being virtual with everyone. So thanks again for having me, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. So as you mentioned, I'm the founder of Genie/GenieBox, which has been a subscription box primarily targeting Black women and also featuring Black women. So we would have successful women curate boxes around who they are, sort of tell a retail story in a subscription box form, like a magazine in a box, if you will. So the idea is that, like, if you were to see a woman's feature in a magazine and she told you her favorite book and her favorite products, we're then sort of bringing that editorial into a box form that you can buy and have in your home, and sort of use those same products and resources for your life. So that was the kind of thought around GeenieBox. And I've been we've been in operation since 2016. Before that, this is my second sort of entrepreneurial venture. Before that, I'd been doing marketing consulting, primarily focused on independent films, documentaries in particular. And even in the process of GeenieBox, I've still sort of maintained a small consulting practice, just doing that work. My day job, in a lot of ways, if you will, has been my old business. And then most recently last year, I wrote a children's book called An ABC of Equality. And the idea around that is to give parents and caregivers tools to discuss difference and identity with young folks. So in a real, like, sort of simplistic dictionary form, using the ABCs as a tool. So it's a lot of different things, but I think the driving narrative around all of those things is, how do we use story and identity to inspire and empower and grow our own lives, and also our communities.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I think it's fascinating that you like got into the editorial part and found your own niche by taking those people that you may admire on the magazines, but you may not get the full story, and think
Right.
about the products and the books and what they're reading, what's really important to them. I've seen some of your GeenieBox subscription. You've featured some amazing folks, and it's wonderful because you feel like you're getting a true sense of who those people are, and you're getting something that's fully curated from their
Yes.
perspective. So kudos to doing that. I think it's phenomenal.
Thank
Um,
you.
So how did you even come up with the concept of Geenie, and just what is the meaning behind Geenie for you?
Yeah, so the background behind that is that I used to do this event series called Michelle O Brunch, and I did that for a few years,
Mhm.
basically from 2009 to 2014. So about 5 years, and again, it was just a fun thing that we did. We hosted brunches in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, and I was at that time super excited about Michelle Obama and this, being a monumental moment for not only like everyone, but in particular, like, Black women to see a Black woman in the White House. I was enamored, like, it was like Michelle Obama and her husband, like I was just totally into this idea of having this, powerful Black woman front and center in that way. And in particular, back in 2009, I felt like that was like my late 20s. I'm aging myself a bit. But and I think in that moment, there weren't as many sort of global Black women in that way, like global business and political Black women. There was a lot of like entertainment, and still is. There's a lot of like Black women in entertainment and media, and like, folks like um, Oprah and Beyonce, and sort of like there have definitely been these like iconic Black women stories, but none in the way that we saw Michelle Obama, who was a professional, who was an equal partner with her husband, and then came into the White House to sort of be this woman on a global stage. So I didn't know what that meant at the time and what she might do with that, with all of us, and like what her agenda might be. But I definitely wanted to just talk with my friends about it. And so the brunch series was born. And in that series, what we did was we would have a different woman sort of curate the brunch and talk about leadership from her point of view. We pick about 25 women to join. We'd think about like what were the activities during the brunch, what would be the takeaways, and so we did that for a number of years. We did some other events outside of that, like we did a marketplace, so like a pop-up shop. We did like a conference, like a mini conference during social media week. So there were other activities outside of the brunch, but the most of the activity revolved around this idea of going to brunch and talking about women's leadership. So in 2015 or 16, no, but 2015 is when I started to think about, was this actually my career path? Like, at that point, I thought that my career path was going to be around sort of small business marketing. And so I'm like, all right, well, is women's leadership really the thing that I want to do? And how could I do this around scale, at scale? And I had looked at the subscription box model as an opportunity as a non-technical founder. Like I'm not a coder. So the subscription box model was a really great entry point if you want to build like a scalable business and you don't actually have technical skills. So that's how we moved into the GeenieBox. And really, like the thought behind the name was, well, we couldn't continue to use Michelle Obama's name, like, as a small kind of like grassroots brunch. That was probably fine, but like to incorporate and professionalize, like it wouldn't have made much sense. So I thought about like, I think that was around the time that this idea of Black Girl Magic started to bubble up on social media. So when you think of magic, you think of like Geenie. And so I was like, all right, Geenie is like both the genius and the magic of Black women. Like that's really um, the background behind the name.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fabulous name. True story. Every time I think about your company, I always think about Christina Aguilera's song, I'm a
Oh,
genie in
that's
a box.
hilarious. That's hilarious. I never thought about that.
I always like sing it to myself. I'm a genie in a bottle.
Yeah.
But I love it. And you featured some amazing folks. Beverly Bonds. One of my favorite actually is actually you and your mom being
Oh,
featured
thank you.
as the genies. So
Thank you.
just really great job on that. So now you are an author of a children's book. Let's talk a little bit about ABCs of equality.
Yeah. So I when I talk about that story, it's also like, to me it's about like sort of being open to an opportunity, right? Because I don't have the traditional story of coming to becoming an author, right? Like I didn't go out and pitch an ABC of equality. Actually, my publisher showed up in my inbox one day, which was, I don't know what that was. I have no idea why that happened. I'm still sort of trying to figure out like,
The publisher slid into your DM.
yeah, like literally, like, I think it might have been the use of hashtags, honestly. I asked my like editor one day and she thought that like, the publisher might have been like looking on Instagram for like different new voices. And actually what I've seen since then is that it looks like in their model, they're always hunting for different potential authors, right? So a lot of the authors that are with this publisher, name is Quarto, are not necessarily like blockbuster people that you may know, right? They're just like thinking about like what are some voices that might be interesting to partner with, commission, and that sort of thing, which I really give them a lot of credit for doing that. And even since me, there's been tons of before and since me, there have been tons of just like undiscovered like authors who first time authors that they work with, which is amazing. So yeah, they showed up at my doorstep in my email, and they inquired about like whether or not I'd be interested in writing a children's book. And at that point, they were thinking about doing one around equality. And what did I think about that? And it took me a couple of days to respond because I thought it was a little bit of a joke, to be honest. So I had to like do some research and like figure out if these are reputable people, and like try to understand like what does this opportunity like mean for me, and like a little bit of the whole imposter syndrome, which I'm loath to actually. I don't really like that framing, but and I can say more about that later. But like, yeah, it was a little bit of like, how dare I be an author, right? Like, who am I to create this piece? And so I had to kind of move through that, have a conversation with them, and like, you know, quite frankly, ask them how, like, why me? Like, why? What do they see in me that I'm not actually seeing in myself? Around this. And so, yeah, and we talked about that. We talked about, how they saw me in terms of like the storytelling and the stuff around identity and the focus on difference and leadership and all other stuff. And I was like, oh, I guess I can see it. I see the line that you're drawing, the picture you're painting, and I actually can that resonates. So yeah, we then started working on a book together. That was in 2018 that I received that invitation, and it was published last fall in September of 2019. So that is the genesis behind an ABC of Equality.
And voila, you are now an author, and
Yeah.
you're doing a lot of press during this time, your book series. So, I mean, we're going to transition a little bit into, how has COVID affected your small business? And I could kind of see that. I can answer some of those questions for you, but I'll let you definitely talk about that a little bit more. But just being on this book press tour and COVID hits you, where are you now?
Yeah, so one ways in which it's impacted me is that you can hear my refrigerator in our conversation. So now we have to do professional events in
Yeah.
our homes, right? So that's like one tangible way that it has impacted me. But I would say that in terms of the book tour in particular, there was actually only one book event that was scheduled like during this time at the very beginning of March. And I just said, like, can we do this virtually? And at first there was a lot of pushback because it was actually a paid book engagement. They were going to pay for me to come up, go from New York to Boston, and then actually pay for me to be there. So it was like my first kind of like sort of like significant payment for a book event, because till then, like after, like during the book tour proper, which was last fall, a lot of those book events I didn't personally get paid. Those were about selling the book, right? So this
Mhm.
is like sort of first like book event where like I'm getting paid to speak. I'm also giving a workshop. I'd done a little bit of these like workshops here in New York that I created, but they were, not, they weren't sort of high dollar events. They're for children, and like, you just do things for children, right? So but I didn't feel comfortable traveling, even if it was to Boston, and I'm from Boston, you're from Boston. And at that point I was like, no, I don't want to do it. And they didn't want to reschedule. And I said, well, I'll just do it for free, because it was more important to me that, like, yeah, it would have been a nice little paycheck, but it was more important to me that like there was not a disruption in, you know, um, this school calendar. And I'm glad that I did, because like about 2 or 3 weeks, 2 weeks after that, the school closed, right? So had I not done the book event and we sort of decided like, oh, let's reschedule when it's a convenient time, then those children wouldn't have had the experience. I wouldn't have had the experience with them. And so I think, there's definitely the interruption in terms of like the potential financial opportunities, because you like not, what I'm hearing is like people haven't necessarily figured out what the rates are for speaking engagements in the virtual space. Some people have, but I, it's not. It's a newer model, right? So I haven't. I definitely haven't charge for any speaking engagement as we've moved into this new space. And I don't know that I would. I don't really know what that might look like. And in my case, since my audience is largely schools or parents, um, I just, it remains to be seen how the author piece sort of fleshes out. But I'm open to kind of figuring that out with the school or with the parent group.
Yeah,
Um,
sort
and
of
then,
like a conflicting part on your, your morals versus like the business aspect of it right now.
yeah, or there's even like the time piece of it, right? Like, if people should pay you for your time, but at the same time, like it's not as if it's a in this example that I used earlier, at least that was like people were all in the kids were all in one classroom. So technically speaking, that could have been a paid event because it was everyone's in one classroom, right? But if you're in a scenario where like I'm teaching a class of kids who are all in different homes and like different environments, and it, it's almost like, from what I'm hearing from both teachers and also parents, they're having a very hard time even wrangling a scenario like that. So like, how much value are the students going to get? How much value are the teachers going to get in that scenario? So yeah, I guess I'm open and I'm flexible around if opportunities present themselves to talk about the book to parents and or teachers, though I'm not necessarily pushing it right now, because I understand that people are like, they're trying to figure out this new normal. Like it's a, it's a challenging time for us, but like certainly it's a challenging time for parents and teachers. Like you know, they're not, if they hadn't been homeschooling, this is like a whole new ball game. So, we'll see how see how that goes. And what I'm hearing is like some schools are even have already closed for the entire school year.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's a
So what
lot.
I've heard from you so far is that your life has been transformed so many different times. You moved to Boston, moved from Boston rather to New York. You worked in a certain space. Then you created the GeenieBox. Now you're authoring. What's the next phase of Chana?
Yeah, I mean, so right now I'm still focused on Genie. We had already begun a pivot before COVID. So fourth quarter 2019 and this past first quarter, we were like just thinking about pivot. You know, I've been thinking about pivot. Actually, our last subscription box was this past December, and so this, you know, we were already in this kind of like, what do we do next? How do we think about the business? And so the only thing that sort of changed that is that we had hoped, you know, we were in this first quarter, we were planning to release what that pivot was to the larger investment community at South by Southwest. Like that was the plan. But as South by Southwest went away, that kind of large pool of investors and large potential conversations around what our new business is going to look like evaporated. But and that, yeah, that was definitely disappointing, like personally, and I'm sure for many other businesses. But what actually has happened as a result is that we've gotten super clear about what who we are and what we're going to do, and like what the new business model is. I've had great conversations with VCs, other startup founders, um, customers, potential partners, and I don't know that I would have been able to get this much like opportunity to just have discussion with people if it had not been for this moment, and that like a lot of people in my industry are actually working from home, and so have a little bit more bandwidth if, you know, obviously like, they're also dealing with potential family challenges, and you have to think about like what folks might be dealing with health wise, or all those other things, right? Like, so people are definitely being very human in this moment. I'm not people aren't robots, but there's not the like hustle and bustle of like, okay, I'm, you know, I have 10 meetings and I'm going from here to here and I'm traveling and like everyone's grounded, like people are at home. So I think there's a little bit more window that you might be able to get on someone's calendar. So that's been useful. And so we've just been using this time to think about infrastructure and build the company that we want to build.
Well, thank you so much for bringing that up. Throughout all of my conversations with NESVANMAR, I always talk about what the silver linings are for the different businesses. And there is the common theme that, you know, people are using this time to pivot and really look deep into their business and seeing what they really want it to look like, feel like, operate like coming out of COVID. So it's great. And it's great to hear that, you know, venture capitalists, investors are a little bit warmer and that they're
Well,
taking that time. Not that
a note, yeah, like a note on that. Like, it's not necessarily they're like warmer to potential investment. That remains to be seen, but they're warmer for conversations, I think, or just more available to conversations. Um, I had a really great conversation with a startup founder this morning who, you know, it was a lot of like a tug of war because he was like, you know, like investors, like I see what you want to do, but investors have they have a recency bias, right? Like they're thinking about what, you know, there's COVID-19 right now, so what does that mean for your product right now? So if you can't talk about like what your product can do right now, you know, in this moment, even though necessarily our pivot, and I won't say much about our pivot just yet, but our pivot is actually really based in like the real world and like what we're going to do and like, you know, offline, right? And so there's definitely an online component, but he was like, if I was you, I would center and talk more about what that online component is, and maybe even think about how you do the online first. And the way I looked at the business is that we were going to be building the offline, and then, you know, the online would come in like literally like right after that. But it does make a little bit more sense given where we are and like all the unknowns, right? Like we don't necessarily know how long we're going to be home. You know, hopefully it's maybe a few more weeks, you know, but realistically, folks are predicting, you know, early June or late June or even into the summer. So, you know, since that's a bit of an unknown when we're going to be back, you know, when businesses are going to reopen in the real world, you have to really think about how your business translates online and how you talk to customers online, which is essentially what the subscription box was doing before anyway. So it's interesting to kind of be like, you know, like, hey, like now let's go back to like thinking about, you know, how do we build online first, which is yeah, it's a pivot and then another pivot. So it's a lot of thinking that needs to that we've had to do in this moment.
Well, we wish you well on that. Can't wait to see what Genie 2.0 has in store for us. Before we close this interview, I always like to ask if you can share any good business tips, any apps that you live by, any advice for entrepreneurs or even women in business that can uplift us at this time and help us be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So um, another thing about this time that's really that has come to light for me is a real appreciation for 101 and intimacy and thinking in concentric circles, right? I think that there's been a real rush for everyone to think about what they can do en masse, right? Like, what do you know, how do you solve for this pandemic, like en masse? Like, how do I create the next, you know, series online that gives you 10 tips to do X, Y, and Z. And I would encourage everyone to think about like how they can really take care of themselves and also take care of their immediate community. So like, what does that look like? You know, like I this pandemic has really forced me to think about my health for real, like not for fake, you know, like
Real
for
for
real, like for real, right? Like just like, so what does that look like? What does my mental health look like? What does my food health look like? You know, eventually I want to start working out, you know, that I haven't got that into the mix yet, but I'm working toward that. So like I'm trying to get my real inner house in order. And I think, you know, to the extent that people can work on their inner self, so that they can use their light really strategically to work outwardly, right? But it's from the in out, right? And not from the out in. And you know, your inner world, like what your inner world looks like, like it's actually gonna like be manifested in your outer world. I really believe that. And so my biggest job in this moment, I feel like, is to really get that inner world super tight, you know, like super tight. And, you know, take care of my family and friends, and be there as a good community person for my family and friends, like being on the phone with them, having conversations with them, seeing what they need, what I might be able to, how I might be able to support them. You know, I have a friend who's later on today, like she asked some friends, you know, earlier, if they wanted to chip in for us to give her money so that she could buy groceries upstate and then drive them down to New York. And give people, whoever does it, because I actually have just been doing, um, I have not gone to the grocery store. I've been doing just, you know, deliveries, right? So Amazon, other grocery deliveries, but it's become harder and harder to get my deliveries from Amazon. So her thought was like, not even because of me, but just other people. She's like, I have grocery store upstate. There's tons of food. Like I'm gonna go grocery shopping, and then I'm gonna like come down to New York and drop off like groceries and contact lists for anyone who wants me to drop them off. And like I'm gonna get a pool of money, and I'm gonna do this within my community. And so she didn't create a GoFundMe and do this for like, and I'm not, there's nothing wrong with those ideas, like, but there's there's the there is the real community way of looking at life, which is how can I build for the people around me, you
Mhm.
know. And if we can do that more, like we could really be strategic about how we think about the people in our lives, I think it's extremely useful. And so I would just encourage entrepreneurs to do that. Like, how do they think about themselves and how do they think about the people in their lives? And if they're called to do something on a mass scale, and if they have the resources to do something on a mass scale, sure, do it. Like, you know, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna say don't do that. If you have an opportunity to get masks for hospitals, sure. Um, but I think real community building starts in your own inner world, and moves concentrically outward.
Yes,
So,
what I'm hearing is really work on your own temple so that
mm-hmm,
when it is fully built, you can really serve that community and serve outwards to other people.
mm-hmm.
Mm, praise God to that. All right, so Chana, before we end this interview, let people know how can we contact you? How can we keep up with you on social media?
Yeah, so I've been very negligent with social media recently, but you can always find me. My favorite place to park is on Instagram. So if I am going to post anywhere, I'm probably going to be posting there. So that's at Chana Ewing. So ChanaEwing. And people are also welcome to email me. I'm definitely on my email all the time. So you're more than welcome to email me, and that's just Chana at GeenieBox.com. So that's CHANA at GeenieBox.com. And I don't know if your listeners have um, a if you're sending email, like if you have an email list or whatever have you, you're free to include my personal email in your email list as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you for such a thoughtful interview today. I really love some of the things that you talked about, just really looking inwards and building yourself, especially during this crisis right now and all of the things that are happening around us. I really love the message that you provided today.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you all will enjoy this video with Chana Ginelle Ewing. All right, Chana, it was great talking with you.
Thank you.